Let me ask you something personal. You're working, maybe full-time. Maybe you picked up a side gig on weekends. Maybe you've cut the streaming subscriptions, started making coffee at home, and stopped buying things you used to not even think twice about. You're doing everything right. And yet, at the end of every month, the math still doesn't add up. If that sounds like your life right now, drop a yes in the comments. Because I want you to know something before we go any further. You are not bad with money. You are not lazy. You are not failing. The system is failing you, and the data proves it. Here's the thing. In January 2026, a research firm surveyed 5,000 Americans, a nationally representative sample across every state, every generation, every income bracket. They asked one simple question: are we in a cost of living crisis? 87% said yes. Not 57%. Not 67%. 87. That's not a partisan talking point. That's a near unanimous verdict from people who sit across the full political spectrum. Republicans, Democrats, Independents. Almost all of them looked at their bank accounts and said the same thing. Something is deeply wrong. And today, we're going to follow the data and find out exactly what that something is. Let's start with the number your grocery receipt already knows. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. consumer prices have risen 22.7% since January 2021. Think about what that actually means. Something that cost you $100 in 2021 cost you $122.70 today. But that's the average. The stuff you actually need every single day. It's gone up way more. Food prices are up 25%. Rent is up over 27%. Transportation is up 28%. And by late 2025, coffee was up 19% year over year. Ground beef was up 15%. Here's what nobody talks about. This isn't one category having a bad year. This is every essential category, all at once, all sustained, for 4 straight years. That's not a blip. That's a restructuring of what it costs to simply exist in America. And people are feeling it in the most basic ways. 52% of Americans, more than 1 in every 2 people, say they struggle to pay rent or bills on time each month. 50% say they struggle to afford basic groceries. Not dining out, not vacations, groceries. Comment right now if you've noticed your cart getting smaller while your bill gets bigger, because you are not imagining it. Now I know what you're thinking. But I keep hearing inflation is coming down. Isn't that good news? Here's where it gets really interesting. Yes. Annual inflation cooled from a peak of 9.1% in June 2022 down to around 2.7% by late 2025. And every financial anchor on TV celebrated like we'd won something. But here's what they're not telling you. Inflation going down doesn't mean prices go down. It means prices are rising more slowly. The 22.7% increase you already absorbed, that's locked in. That's the new floor. Your $100 grocery run from 2021 still costs $122.70 today. It's just not climbing as fast anymore. Think about it this way. Imagine someone punched you in the face and then said, "Good news, I'm punching you less hard now." That's not relief. That's just a slower beating. And your paycheck, almost certainly, did not grow 22.7% to keep up. Which means in real terms, real purchasing power, most Americans are poorer today than 4 years ago, even if the number on their paycheck is technically higher. A Statista consumer survey from mid-2025 found that 49% of American adults called the high cost of living their single biggest personal challenge. Not crime, not health, not politics. Cost of living, by a wide margin. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like for a real person. Meet Sarah. She's 34. She works in healthcare administration in a mid-sized Midwestern city, not New York, not San Francisco, somewhere people usually assume is affordable. She makes $58,000 a year, which sounds decent until you break it down. After taxes, she takes home about $3,800 a month. Her rent for a 2-bedroom apartment, because she has a 7-year-old, is $1,650. That's 43% of her take-home income, gone before she buys a single thing. Every financial rule you've ever heard says housing should be 30% of your income. Sarah blew past that threshold the day she signed her lease. Not because she was reckless, because that was the cheapest decent apartment she could find near her daughter's school. Childcare is $1,100 a month because daycare costs have surged 39% since 2019, according to a childcare industry report. Groceries for 2 people, around $600 a month. Utilities, $265 a month, up 12% from just a year ago. Car payment, insurance, and gas, $480. Student loans for the degree that got her that $58,000 job, $312 a month. Do the math. Sarah is already at $4,407 in monthly expenses. She takes home $3,800. Sarah is not broke because she's bad with money. Sarah is broke because the cost of a completely normal life in 2026 exceeds what a completely normal income provides. Sound familiar? Drop a comment if Sarah's budget looks a little too close to yours. Most people completely miss this next part, so pay attention. Housing is where the crisis hits hardest, and it starts before you even think about rent. The Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies found that the national home price-to-income ratio hit 5-to-1 in 2024. In cities like Los Angeles, Denver, and Miami, it tops 8-to-1. Back in 1990, that ratio was 3-to-1 nationally. And even after adjusting for inflation, the average mortgage payment in 2024 was 40% higher than it was in 1990. Here's something that might surprise you. A household earning the national median income of around $80,000 would need to spend nearly 50% of their gross income to afford the median-priced home in America today. Financial institutions tell you to keep housing at 30%. The market is demanding 50%. Someone isn't being straight with you about what's actually possible. And renting was supposed to be the escape valve. It's not. Housing costs rose over 14% in just the 2 years between 2023 and 2025. 38% of Americans have already moved, not because they wanted to, but because their city became too expensive to stay. And 52% say they no longer believe they'll ever live in their ideal city or state. More than half of Americans have quietly surrendered the idea of living where they want to live, not because of ambition, because of rent. Poll question for you. Are you currently spending more than 30% of your income on housing? Vote in the poll on screen. I have a strong feeling the results are going to be eye-opening. Here's the generational gut punch. A January 2026 New York Times and Siena College poll surveyed 1,625 registered voters and asked a simple question. Is the middle class harder to achieve today than it was for your parents' generation? 77% said yes. Among Americans aged 18 to 44, that number jumped to 84%. Only 4% of young Americans said it's easier now. And only 14% of all Americans feel they are getting ahead financially right now. Not keeping pace, not staying even. Getting ahead. Just 14%. This brings us to something that most people never consider. The Pew Research Center tracked the share of Americans who qualify as middle income since 1971. In 1971, 61% of Americans were solidly middle class. By 2019, that number had fallen to 51%, a 10-point drop, one generation. And that was before 2021. Here's what's fascinating. The middle class didn't shrink because people got lazy. It shrunk because the costs that define a middle-class life, a home, healthcare, education, childcare, inflated far faster than middle-class wages did. The lifestyle stayed theoretically the same. The income required to fund it quietly doubled. And healthcare is the silent killer in all of this. The Kaiser Family Foundation projected that Affordable Care Act marketplace premiums, The health insurance that millions of working Americans who don't get employer coverage rely on could jump from $888 a month in 2025 to $1,904 a month in 2026 if key subsidies aren't extended. That's a potential increase of $12,192 per year for insurance alone, before you see a single doctor, before a single copay. But here's where it gets really interesting. How did we actually get here? Because this didn't happen by accident. The Economic Policy Institute has documented what they call the productivity pay gap. Here's what that means in plain English. From 1948 through the late 1970s, there was a deal. An unspoken, broadly honored deal. When workers produced more, when the economy grew, workers got paid more. Productivity and wages rose together, almost step for step. Then, starting around 1973, that deal quietly broke. From 1973 to 2013, worker productivity grew 74%. The economy got massively more efficient. Companies made far more output per person. But the typical worker's hourly pay, it grew just 9% over 40 years. Here's the part that will blow your mind. That 65 percentage point gap didn't disappear. It went somewhere. In 1965, the CEO of a major U.S. company earned about 20 times what a typical worker made. By 2013, that ratio had exploded to nearly 300 to 1. The math is simple but powerful. If wages had kept pace with productivity the way they did in the post-war era, the median American worker would be earning roughly $102,000 a year today, instead of the actual median of around $59,000. That $43,000 annual gap per worker, that's not an abstraction. That's the rent you can't afford. That's the healthcare you're skipping. That's the savings account that never fills up. That gap is the cost of living crisis, right there, in one number. So where does that leave us right now, heading deeper into 2026? A McKinsey consumer survey from the fourth quarter of 2025 found that 29% of American adults dipped into their savings in a single quarter, up from 26% just 3 months earlier. 28% are leaning on credit cards more than before, and a growing number of Americans are using buy now, pay later plans, the financial product that lets you put your groceries on a payment plan just to fill their fridge. The worker quit rate, which economists use as a real-time confidence indicator, has stalled at 2%. That's the lowest since 2014. In a healthy economy, people quit because they have options and feel confident chasing better pay. Today, people are gripping their jobs out of fear. That's not a strong labor market. That's a nervous one. 70% of Americans now rate the economy as fair or poor, and 46% believe things will get even less affordable before the end of this year. Here's something that most people never consider, though, and this is the part I don't want you to miss. This is not inevitable, and it's not unfixable. Other wealthy countries have solved significant pieces of this exact puzzle. Germany and Denmark built strong collective bargaining frameworks that kept wages rising alongside productivity for decades after America's diverged. Canada and Australia implemented housing supply policies that kept price-to-income ratios far below American levels. Countries with universal childcare, France, Sweden, Japan, effectively cut one of the biggest household expenses to near zero, freeing up hundreds or thousands of dollars a month for working families. Some of these ideas are being actively debated here right now. Expanded childcare subsidies, zoning reform to increase housing supply and push rents down by increasing competition, strengthening worker organizing rights to restore some of the bargaining power that eroded after 1973, extending healthcare subsidies so that a family doesn't face a potential $22,848 annual insurance bill just to have basic coverage. None of these solutions are magic. None of them are free. They're all genuinely contested, and reasonable people disagree on the best approach. But here's the thing. They've been tested. They work in places that tried them, which means the question isn't whether solutions are possible. The question is whether there's enough collective pressure to actually pursue them And that is where you come in. So let's land this plane. You're not broke because you failed. You're financially stressed because the cost of a normal American life has outpaced what a normal American income provides for the first time in generations, at scale, all at once, across every essential category simultaneously. The 87% who call it a crisis aren't catastrophizing. They're just reading their bank statements. And here's the beautiful paradox in all of this. The fact that 87% of Americans agree across every political line, every state, every income bracket, is actually the beginning of something. You can't solve a problem that only 30% of people acknowledge. When 87% of people are living the same reality, that creates a kind of pressure that is very hard for any system to ignore forever. So here's my real question for you. Not rhetorical. I actually want to know. When you look at your finances right now, what's the one cost hitting you hardest? Is it rent, groceries, healthcare, childcare, student loans? Drop it in the comments, because the data tells us what's happening nationally. But your comment tells us what's happening in your actual life, and that matters more than any survey. The data is speaking. Now it's your turn.